At the Game Awards in 2023, we saw something that we never thought we would see: a chair in the water, and that chair looked really good. And then the camera pans over, and it's Kratos. Some people thought this was a new game, some people thought this was a DLC, some people thought it was just something to get you hyped up. But it was only one of those things, and that was a DLC. This is God of War Ragnarok Valhalla, and if you didn't know, God of War Ragnarok was almost Game of the Year last year, and it was a very good game. I played through the whole thing. I platinumed it, obviously on PlayStation 5, as that's only where it was available. But Sony decided to slap us around and give us a quick surprise at the Game Awards when they announced their DLC. I was like, oh, it's probably going to be coming in like a year or something. But no, they had been working on this and it came out around December 12th. And it was free. Now, you gotta remember, this game is huge. And the DLC was huge. So, let's get into, is God of War Ragnarok DLC Valhalla any good? Well, let's just start off with going back to looking at that opening cutscene. That opening cutscene was just, it looks good, it's crisp, and it gets you right into it. It pans over to Kratos, no like bland story. It's right into it. You're driving this boat through the water. The game looks good, it feels good, and you come to the shore and you lose your powers. Oh no, right? After you lose your powers, a few seconds later, you're climbing up the shore and you enter this big door. You enter Valhalla and you start fighting. And then you're either supposed to die or get to a certain point and it'll reset you back to the beginning, where Freya pops up. Ton of stuff like that. But I don't want to spoil the game. Let's get into the game itself. What are the differences from the main game and what makes it better or worse? Now, obviously, since it's a DLC, it's going to be smaller, but it's not as small as I expected. This game has a ton of content, it even has secrets, and it's pretty decently long. It took me like 5 hours or something around that. So, let's get into it. This DLC is a roguelike, unlike God of War Ragnarok, which I don't even know what you would call it. It's just kind of a slasher or a bit of Souls-like in there. But basically, if you don't know what a roguelike is, it's where you continue repeating the same thing over and then get upgrades, and every time you get a little bit farther or a little bit less far, and it gives you story beats along the way. Now, when I say this was effective for this DLC, I don't mean that lightly. You go through, the combat's fun and satisfying, just like God of War, and every run you do changes slightly. I mean, the doors are different, like that you can go through to get into different areas. The enemies are slightly different and vary, but you have to come up with new strategies. And I just think this really fits with God of War really well. And honestly, I wouldn't be too mad if they had charged like 10, $15 for this DLC. Now, how does the roguelike really affect the game itself? Well, I really like how you can get upgrades and you don't have to look for Idun apples and things like that. So you're basically running around, you're killing these different monsters to try and get farther and farther, and every time, every different run, you reach a point where it resets you back to the beginning or it lets you keep going. Now, when I say this is a massive DLC, I mean it. There is a ton of stuff you can do. You can go through different doors. Every choice impacts what you're doing, depending on how hard you want to play it. And it teaches you to learn the enemy types quickly and effectively, so that every run you get farther and farther. And now, like I said, is the roguelike effective? Yeah, I would say so. I kind of liked exploring in God of War Ragnarok, but since this is a DLC and the like place where it is placed, it wouldn't really make sense for you to have to explore that much. I mean, there is upgrades you get along the way through the runs, and then every new run you get new upgrades, and then you have to come back and you get these echoes. Now, one thing I do have to complain about is there's these Valkyries that give you new quests and everything, and after you complete the quest, you collect this currency, which is like echoes or something like that. These echoes, you start every run, you start getting thousands and thousands as you progress further every time you go in. And basically, by the end of the game, the values that you get from doing these quests aren't really enough to keep you doing them, like 20 or more around that. So that's really my only complaint. But another really good thing is that these cutscenes are interesting. The story of this is interesting, and that casual banter between Mimir and Kratos, as usual, is always good. Now, I don't think the game suffers at all from Atreus not being there, and it doesn't affect the story in any way. Though every character has their own character arc still, and Kratos is really just learning his way around and learning what he needs to do, what he feels like he needs to do, and in the end, it comes to a really good resolution. And it turns out that Tyr was the one that invited you, and it comes with a really cool boss fight that also changes and varies every time you go in. Now, what is the final verdict? Is God of War Ragnarok Valhalla actually any good? I would say, yeah, especially for a free DLC that could have literally been barely anything if they'd wanted it to be, since it was free, and they could have charged probably 15, 10, $20 for this DLC, and I wouldn't have complained. I mean, it's a phenomenal DLC. The gameplay loop is interesting, and that satisfying combat keeps you interested, as well as reaching that next story beat. And I mean, also a lot of this has to do with nostalgia as well. So I would say this DLC is one of the better DLCs I've seen in a while. But I'm still waiting for Shadow of the Erd Tree. So come on, Bandai Namco. And yeah, I just wanted to talk about this game. Bye bye.